So let's see, what time is it? It's time.
Okay.
So I want to welcome you. I'm Bob Galen. This is Josh Anderson, my esteemed colleague. Josh is operating as a product owner, if you're familiar with that notion.
Thank you.
So he's managing a backlog here with some themes for us to talk through, and he's going to sort of seed the discussion. Josh and I met maybe 9 years ago at a company called Teradata that does large-scale databases, sort of custom databases. We both met. I was an Agile coach there at the time, probably 9+ years ago, somewhere between 9 and 10 years ago. And Josh was a continuous sort of a build. He was running a build environment at the time, and we started talking about Agile stuff. And then I left the company relatively soon after we met. We worked together maybe 3 or 6 months. And Josh had this idea of doing a podcast, and at the time I thought it was a silly idea. And we called it the Metacast, and he sort of coerced me to start it. And to date, we've continued to do what we call the Metacast. It's an Agile-centric podcast. It's got about 130+ episodes on all things Agile. I think over the years, we've talked about almost every topic under the sun from an Agile perspective. We've revisited things. We've changed our minds about positions that we held like 8, 9 years ago, 10 years ago. We've certainly sort of moved, we have some consistency, but we've moved the bar. So what we like to do, we've done this quite a few times, we like to take the Metacast on the road and collect questions and then sort of pretend that we're talking in a mic and answering questions just like we would do in our podcast, and sort of contrast, different points of view for the questions. So I'm an Agile coach. I spoke yesterday at the keynote. Josh, you want to introduce yourself a little more?
Sure. I'm Josh Anderson. As Bob mentioned, we met close to a decade ago, and we would go to lunch and argue. And I said we should put a microphone between us and record this because other people might find it as useful as I do. We did that. Bob was very skeptical. And 130 episodes later, he's like, gosh, you were right, which makes me very happy. This style session was born from some frustration I had with conference talks where I was hoping it would be something, but it turned out to be something else. So we like to put the ball in your court and bring your questions, and our goal is to help you walk away with the answers you need so you can go back to your place of work tomorrow, next week, and start making the changes you aspire to see happen. So that's what this is about. If you have questions throughout the session, write them on those note cards. A volunteer will bring them up and we'll get through them. So as something comes up, don't be afraid. You didn't miss your chance. We're going to get rolling on this. Cool.
The other thing, one final point, and we didn't discuss this, so this is an adjustment. If you think that both of us are full of it in a respectful, loving way, and you want to jump up here and get in the fray, there is chairs on both sides or stairs on both sides of the stage. Come on up and get involved. And we're not as threatening as we might appear. So at least I'm not. So come up here and get in the fray if you want. So you can write things on cards, but you could also get involved in the Metacast. And we can debate a little bit because the answers, very often, answers are in the gray area. They're situational, and we'd love to hear from you. So what's the first one?
Okay, first question is, can you be Agile without a Scrum Master?
Oh my God, would you take that? I don't.
I say yes, mostly because I've done it. Was it as optimal as it could be? No, but Agile's such a squishy word. Agile means a lot of different things, and I've run very Agile shops without Scrum Masters. I later learned, I feel like I'm plugging the podcast, in an episode that we talked about, the value of a really great Scrum Master. I'd never seen a really great Scrum Master, so I kind of filled in that role. I was that manager and director and that and person. I did that, and it worked reasonably well. But once we got a Scrum Master and I saw what a great Scrum Master does, everything changed for me. I really understood the value that a great Scrum Master brings to an organization and the team itself. So yes, you can be Agile, but I don't think you'll ever be as good as you'd like to be because that role really does offer a lot of value. But I found that really good Scrum Masters are hard to find. So if you find one, hold on to it. Or if you are one, really revel in that role.
I mean, I'd generalize it and say, I think a coach, I think of a Scrum Master as being a coach. They just have a title because it's Scrum. right, or a role in Scrum. And let's just take Scrum out of the equation for a second. I think to become an excellent Agile team, you need a coach, meaning someone to provide advice. It could be an internal coach, an external coach, someone who's been there and done that. They don't have to be permanent. They don't have to be annoying. But when you're new, you don't know what good looks like. When you're new, you don't know what the good practices are. So getting advice, so let's say a Scrum Master as a coach or an advice giver, someone who's been there and done that, that's sort of my negative reaction is, I've seen so many teams that they read a book and they're trying to be Agile by the book. And I think Agile is incredibly simple. One of the insidious parts of Agile, Scrum, Kanban, is it's all described very simply. And doing it is simple, but getting it right, becoming Agile from a mindset perspective is incredibly hard. So if you want to become a high-performance team, whatever that means, I think a Scrum Master / coach can help. But it's not just the title. I've seen so many mediocre Scrum Masters that really, and inexperienced Scrum Masters that really don't know. And just getting a CSM or a certification, a PSM or a CSM doesn't necessarily mean you have the experience that I was talking about. So I would actually take an experienced coach independent of the credentials. If they have some chops, I think that actually matters. Do you resonate with that, or?
Yes, I'm going to follow up, then we have a question. I'll get to you. Oh, no, actually, go ahead.
Give me some examples of how a Scrum Master can torpedo the team.
Some examples of how a Scrum Master can torpedo the team, telling them what to do, designing things for them, not fostering all voices matter from that point of view. And all of these things are sort of the being. So not the tactics. Like I don't know if a Scrum Master, it's a 16-minute stand-up. It's supposed to be 15 minutes. So did a Scrum Master torpedo the team by allowing a daily stand-up to exceed by 2 minutes? That breaks a rule, but I don't think that torpedoes the team. I think torpedoing is more behavioral. Not being courageous, not courageously defending the team. I hope that makes, so part of the role of I think a coach is protecting the team. And sometimes that's external, like people are coming in, everyone knows that, right? Protect the team from impediments and from poaching and from external events coming in and derailing the team. But another part of it is sometimes protecting the team from themselves. So some teams, for example, bite off more than they can chew. And then that causes churn in sprints and things. So I think those are some areas that come to mind where by not doing that, I think torpedo sounds so sort of, deadly to me, but not supportive of the team, right? It's really a servant leader coach role. So what is a coach? So a coach doesn't, you measure a sports coach by their team, not by themselves, and how their team performs, not just the star, but how their team. And I very much think that those sports analogies of high-performance teams can help the mindset of the Scrum Master.
Yeah, that's something that we've dug into, is how Scrum Master or leadership roles really resonate with sports coaches. It's a coach's responsibility is to make that player better. A Scrum Master's responsibility is to make the players and the team better. So you see examples everywhere of how great coaches lead great teams, and somehow some coaches fail because they don't connect with the team, they don't do those things, they torpedo the team. All those things, they end up getting fired in the sports world. Scrum Master role is very similar. Okay.
What's
next question? What can a Scrum Master do to aid a team who does not feel empowered? And possibly more importantly, how do you identify when a team does not feel empowered? So I'm going to leave that to you while I get the next question.
Okay. So how do they empower? The net is?
How do they empower, and how do you identify when a team is not empowered?
Well, I think when teams are looking for someone to tell them what to do. So very often I see a pattern in early adopted teams, or teams that are early in their transformational journey, where they're looking, so let's say a team has been used in a command and control environment. They've been used to be told what to do. And then we have a magical meeting and everyone says, go Scrum and be Agile. And on Monday morning, everyone is supposed to be Agile. So I've seen the teams like looking for someone to tell them, they think it's a trick. And it's like, oh, they're trying to fire me, they're tricking me. And the team isn't used to solving their own problems. They're not used to being empowered. They're not used to taking ownership. And I think as a Scrum Master, as a coach, you need to recognize that and you need to encourage the team. In my keynote yesterday, I was talking about creating space, if you were here. So creating the space. Actually, sometimes you need to let a team stew. Like let the team sort of stew in their own juices for a little while and not solve the problem. So we were talking earlier about how can a Scrum Master derail the team? One way they can do it is to swoop in and solve things as a problem solver too soon and not let the team struggle a little bit and figure things out on their own. So I think it's being aware of the maturity of your team. There's a metaphor in the Agile community called COHAA, which is an Aikido metaphor that talks about maturity matters in our coaching. And for a SHU team, which is a very beginning team, I think the Scrum Master is very careful to create the space, but also to come in and give them direction, if that makes sense to everyone. It's like if you had a brand new baseball team, you have to tell them how to play the game. You have to give them instructions, and I think a good Scrum Master balances between creating the space, but really emphasizing empowerment. The other thing is protect them, and maybe Josh can pick this up. A team that's on that cusp of newness, they can get derailed by someone coming in from the outside, right? So maybe you can talk about that, the protection. I think that's important, don't you?
Yeah, I think if you really understand the maturity of the team, and COHAA is a model that we use quite often, and understand the way you coach and empower, with a SHU team, a new team, don't empower them as much as you would a very experienced, mature team. So you've got to understand where each team is and give them enough power so they can grow, and also give them the space to grow. You have to do that. And I've always said, as a Scrum Master, your goal is to put yourself out of a job. You should be infusing that Scrum Master mentality into every member of your team. So that way, you can step back and they've done their things. And if you don't allow that to happen, you are part of the problem. You are not empowering the team to grow and become what they can be. So you have to look at yourself. Maybe it's some of the things that you're doing that aren't supporting that team's growth. We have a question.
Yeah, kind of to that same effect. I've seen myself in that role where I've been a little bit too controlling, that I've been put in a position of, hey, you got to make this team better, you know all the information. So I've taken steps to pull myself away from that, and I guess allow, like, guide the team, and here are the people I go to talk to get this done, and here's who you can try. The team comes back, though, with the mentality of, what are you doing for the team? And I try to tell them that, hey, you guys are able to run without me, that's great, like, that's what I'm trying to get to. But how do you combat that feeling of, I feel like they feel at times that I'm now abandoning them.
Okay. So the question is, how do you do that balance? The question came from someone who has stepped away a little bit, and the team starts to question, hey, like, are you in this? Are you here to support us or not? So what I would do, I would just have a very direct talk with them and say, hey, I think you guys are maturing, and I want to give you space to grow, so I'm going to try some things. I would tell them up front, rather than have them guess and kind of wonder what's going on. That's the one tactic that I would give you, is be open and honest and say, hey, listen, you guys are getting really good, and I want to see you spread your wings, so I'm going to step back and let that happen, instead of having it be a guessing game, because I've done the same thing, and I realized, oh crap, I should have said something to them, so they didn't know what in the world is this guy doing. Yeah.
I think of role clarity. As you go from whatever your environment is to Agile environments, there's something I call role confusion. Like the role of the manager, pre-Agile, post-Agile. The role of Scrum Master is a new thing. So I actually think part of the solution would be to present to them, this is my role. This is the classic, go to the Scrum Guide or go to the references and say, this is the role of the Agile team. This is the role of the product owner. This is the role of the Scrum Master. You're not pulling this out of thin air. I'm behaving in my role and sort of clarify that. I've actually done that in organizations a lot. And then I found that teams, as we grow or as time goes on, they get re-confused. So in one company, about every 6 months, I had to remind people of sort of the roles and responsibilities of the core Agile roles, but also the most important thing is the interactions. Does that make sense to everyone? Like the interactions between the team and the product owner, the interactions between the Scrum Master and management. became something, and talk about what a good interaction looks like and what a bad interaction looks like. So folks get a feel. I don't think, there's such simple roles that I think helping clarify that really helps the team. Like, because it's not just about your role, it's the team. So who's stepping up to fill the void? The team. So there's your role in relationship to the team. And you may be pulling back. Well, guess what? They have to, and I'm doing this intentionally, but you have to step in. And this is what it looks like.
All right, next set of questions are a bit of a combo platter, very similar.
A combo platter?
A combo platter. Everybody loves a combo platter,
like a seafood thing, right?
Yes,
like
well,
shrimp and lobster.
Lots of places have a combo platter.
Like
and
surf
they're
and
always
turf.
the best. So these are very similar, and it talks about teams that have a divergent set of skills, so very senior and very junior, and how do you help team leads understand or support them in ways to bring the more junior folks up without having burnout, where they feel like everything is on them. This is something that I've wrestled with a lot, and the thing that I've found is that people are often making mistakes with the best intentions. So they're in a meeting room, they're having a discussion about a very difficult topic, and they know the answer. And they know the easiest way to get the team on is to just answer the question. They are the architect, they're the senior person, they've done it 1,000 times, they know what the answer is, and they know the answer every time. Great, we're done, we move on, we go write some code, we're happy. We ship that story, customers are happy, everyone else is happy. The problem is there are 6, 7 other people that are on that team that basically go silent because they know somebody always has the answer. So that team starts to shut down because that leader often becomes the only one speaking. So at that point, you have to recognize that and see and have a really difficult talk with that senior person who's trying to do the right things for all the right reasons. They are trying to get the team to the answer as quickly as possible, but often that short-term win leads towards a long-term loss. So you have to sit down and talk to them and get them to understand that you answering the question every time right away isn't always the most healthy thing for your team and your org. So the thing that I ask them to do is wait 10 seconds. If you know the answer, wait 10 seconds. Look around the room. Kind of eyeball somebody that you think is ready to talk. Let them answer. Don't be the first person to answer. And then when you do answer, the best approach you can take is just talking questions. You know the answer in your head. Guide the rest of the team there. Tease that out. Ask the questions that will help that junior dev make that leap to connect the dots. And then they'll go, oh, okay, yeah, we should do this. And then keep doing that and keep doing that. So in these more senior roles, talking in questions only starts to empower the rest of the team to answer the questions. So use that technique, teach your team leads or whatever you call them to work like that, and then you'll start to spread that knowledge throughout, and you'll get more and more people that are encouraged and empowered to step up and answer those questions.
See, I don't even like, it's going to sound like I'm disagreeing a little bit, you were emphasizing the team lead. I don't like the notion of a team lead in Agile teams. Now, I'm not taking money. So I've organizationally, as a VP, I've taken over a large organization and moved them to Agile, and I actually de-emphasized roles like team lead or architect, if that makes sense to everyone, like senior architects and team leads. Because what I found is the teams would sort of kowtow to them. And so I didn't take money away from them. I didn't take their title. They could put whatever they want on their business card. But from an Agile team perspective, I was like, you're all leaders. So every time I would talk to a team, I would expect everyone to lead to their capability. We would have interns from college. And when we would onboard them, I would be like, I want you to solve our problems. I don't care how much experience. If you have experience, I want everyone on the team to bring their experience to bear, to not look at Josh and say, oh, Josh, oh my God, Josh is the leader. So I'm like, and he's bigger than me. So his opinions are going to outweigh mine. I want the best designs. I want the best decisions. I want the highest performing team. I want everyone to get skin in the game. Now, I did have, at that same company, at some point, the teams weren't self-leading. So I had done that, and then no one was making decisions. They were sort of, they got into a place where they were underperforming, and then I had to create leaders, team leads. And I remember the town hall where I announced it. I'm like, I'm about to do something that I really detest. And I was really sad. And I'm like, I'm going to create leaders. And my hope is that we'll only need them for like 3 to 6 months. And then you all start popping up again and leading yourselves as appropriate. Because one of the things with leaders is they can get exhausted. Leads they can make mistakes. They can get exhausted. One person has to make all decisions at a team. My gosh, that doesn't make sense if we have experience. So I try to de-emphasize it as much as possible. A succinct way to say it is I want everyone to lead to their capability. I want every opinion. I want best solutions. I want best performing teams. I don't care what your title is. I mean, I know org charts and titles and money matter, but I want performance trumps that.
So in fairness to the person who asked the question, team leads is in quotes followed by parentheses management term.
So I think I think we got the point across, I hope.
Yep. So I agree completely with Bob. I found that when you define a lead, people start to step back. It's one of those things where step forward, everybody else steps back, and that person is stuck answering all of the questions. So we're going to continue with team and trust. So this question is, trust is obviously very important when practicing Agile. Can you talk a little bit how to build it across an organization too, not just within teams?
I mean,
so this is our first
yesterday,
episode.
I'll tee this up, it'll be short. I think you have to give it when it's really uncomfortable. I mean, I'm a software engineer by training. I did architecture for years in old languages, in old systems for 25 years. I mean, I still have development chops and design chops and architectural chops and scalability chops. And what I've learned is I just have to shut up. I don't matter. I have to trust other people. And in my brain, when I'm trusting, there's all this conflict. Oh my God, they're making a mistake. Oh my God, is that going to work? Oh my God, that's not the way I would do it. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I just need to sort of control that. And I've gotten really good at that. And it's like, I have to remind myself, I've hired good people. We've vetted them. We've trained them. We have the teams are high performance. Let them fly. And so I talked yesterday about extending trust. So I think a big part of it is just shutting up and trusting these wonderful people. Now, we almost get in our own way. How many people in here have ever done what I've said? We say we trust them, but even at a team level, but you don't really trust. How many developers in the room trust the testers on your team? That they can test the hardest things? No one. How many testers in the room trust that developers can test their own code? And so there's many distrust even in a team because of, I don't know, myths and fables and baggage that we bring. So I think it's let the baggage go and extend a high trust environment.
So I echo that you definitely have to set the example as the leader. One of the things I've found to be very successful in coaching teams to get there is they often inherently know what trust is, but oftentimes they struggle to execute on it. So Crucial Conversations is a great book. I ask my teams to read that, treat it like a book club. That helps give them a framework of how to have those difficult discussions when maybe it felt like you didn't trust me, or why didn't you empower me to do this? Give them a framework to have those discussions, because otherwise it's just this sparkly term over here that's trust. And we say, trust more, you've got to trust more, you've got to trust more, but you also have to help them understand how to do it. Because maybe no one actually taught them the right way to trust or what a good team looks like. There's another book that we read that used to be called Team Geek. They refactored it and labeled it something else. I forget what the term is, but it's a book that goes across thousands of teams and gives teams an example of what a good software engineering team looks like. It gives you patterns and anti-patterns, so that way people can connect and they can see and they have a roadmap to what good looks like. So that's another book that we read as a group. Again, so we have a framework. Developers like frameworks. That's what we do. We like Node and Angular and .NET and all these things and patterns, and give them a framework for being a good team. Give them a framework for building trust. That's one of the things that's missing. That's the connective tissue that teams need to turn that magical word of trust into a process, right? That's what developers do, is they have a process, they build things. We'll give them the tools to build that process.
I think we're presumptuous, like estimates. So many times I see people like second-guessing teams' estimates. You know, I've built software, but it was 20 years ago, and you say it's going to take a week, and I'm like, my dog could do it in a day, right? But she says it's a week. So, and I keep thinking it's less than that, or it's trivial, or I don't understand it. But my day for my dog doesn't matter. She's going to be doing the work. It's like, I just have to get out of my own way. I actually don't think trust is that hard. I think we have the baggage that gets in the way. I think we're full of ourselves sometimes. The other part of trust is allowing failure. And looking at failure as learning, like my way is the right way and your way is the wrong, whatever that is. And so getting away from that and saying, allow learning to happen. How did we figure things out if we are experienced? A big part of that was hopefully someone in our past allowed us to make mistakes. They supported us. Hopefully you've had, Agile or not, we've had good leaders or good role models who fostered that. Well, we want to do that more often. So just not getting hung up. Just allow the team to sort of emerge and trust them. They'll figure things out. That's the case, I think I said it yesterday, if you've hired good ones, trust them. If you've hired bad ones, fire them. Or escort them, or flatten the tires on their car in the parking lot, whatever it takes to prevent them from mucking things up. But most organizations have really good people. Our biggest problem is not activating them. We worry about the outliers. Everyone with me? We worry about the outliers or maliciousness, and we're not empowering this massive brain trust that we have by trusting it in the teams. What's next?
Next is one of the most common topics we get in all of these talks. It's disconnected/remote teams, and I've got to call out, again,
what is it? The
best handwriting we've ever had on a question.
You don't have to self-identify, but nice job, yes.
This is tremendous.
All right.
Handwriting. How do you see the geez, I'll learn how to.
Now you can't even read it.
No,
oh no, that's not good.
Yeah, the letters are so clear. How do you see collaboration aspect of Agile working for companies that have a lot of employees working from home? What are the challenges and what are some positive aspects of this practice?
You've had distributed teams. Do you have any experience? I mean, you were doing some stuff in Singapore. So
yeah.
You had some widely distributed teams for a while, right?
Yes.
Any lessons learned about how to make that effective?
The one thing you always hear, it's the golden rule of remote teams, is that ensure that there's no advantage to being in the home office. Try and build tools, try and build practices in ways that being remote feels the same as being in the office, right? That's easy to say, it's hard to do. And the things that often trip teams up is they don't think about the remote employees first. So they don't always dial in. A meeting's been going for 10 minutes and somebody's on Slack saying, dial me in, dial me in, dial me in, right? It's a mindset where you as a leader, you have to put that first. Set the example, always dial in first. Say, hey, we're not saying anything until the rest of the team is here. Have all the right tools, have Slack, have everything be the same. Is it harder? Yes. But it does work, but you have to really focus on making that happen. And to me, one of the things I've always loved about this is that your talent pool is now global. You don't have the 100,000 people that live in your radius of your company. You have the billions of people that work across the world. So if you can figure out how to do this well, your talent pool is insanely massive. But you have to work hard to make it work. You have to set examples and standards that we will not discuss anything until everybody's on the phone or on Slack or whatever, and then make sure that everything is visible. If you have physical boards, put a webcam up. Leave it up all the time. If you have stand-ups, have the webcam there, or do it in Slack. There are tools that let you do stand-ups. There are tools that let you do planning poker online. Everybody can be there. All of it's there. You have to use it, and don't do it without the tools. That's the biggest mistake people make, is they have the tools in place, but it's 15 minutes later, oh gosh, that's right. Bob's in Seattle. We forgot to dial him in. It's okay. We'll call him in. It'll be fine, right? That's the number one mistake people make, is they end up inadvertently devaluing remote employees by all those little mistakes. They're doing it on purpose. But it happens, and that person that's on the other side of the phone is like, gosh, I guess I'm really not an important part of the team. I guess, okay, sure. And so then that starts to get them to, why fight so hard for all these things?
I saw a post or an article or something just within the last 2 days, and they talked about remote teams of someone was having this rule. He says, once a month, we all have to become remote. So we all have to dial in, whether we like it or not. So even if there's a home office with a few distributed team members, they were like, we all sort of become remote so that we're empathetic. So what the point he was trying to make is to build empathy towards, so there's the tools, have a really rich, deep tool set. And there are, I'm not a toolmeister, I don't believe that tools solve all problems, but in the distributed team sense, there's some wonderful tools like Slack, there's retrospective tools, there's planning poker tools and things like that. But then like Josh said, we forget the protocol. And what happens is you can relearn if everyone becomes remote. Like listening becomes a skill in a distributed team. Respectful listening, respectful Q&A becomes important, and that level sets it. It's almost like every month we're going to remind ourselves of how hard it is to be interacting in sprint planning remotely so that we can be respectful. So it's a combination of tools to me and then behavioral protocols and empathy on the part of the team. The other final thing I would make, I don't know if anyone in here, if you're spinning up a distributed team, I like getting the teams together, even if it costs you some money. I remember years ago, I worked at Johnson Controls in Milwaukee, and they were kicking off some Scrum teams. And to their credit, they flew some folks in from India for like 3 teams to go through like a boot camp training, and then they were gonna run their first 2 sprints on shore. And then they went back. And those teams became relatively high performance because they had enough time to form as a team. And they didn't, to their credit, Johnson Controls didn't use money as an excuse. They weren't cheap. They realized that in order, it takes a little bit of effort and face-to-face communication to actually become a team. And then the things I'm talking about of tools and distributed behavior and respect can really be activated. So don't be reluctant to try to suggest in your organizations that if we're kicking off a team, we actually spend a little bit of time and a little bit of money pretending that they're a team, actually getting them co-located before we spread them across the world.
So I agree 100%. That's some of the best money I've ever spent is going to China, Malaysia, all these different places, and that connection then becomes real. It's not just a name in Slack or a face on a video chat. You know that person. You've had a meal with that person. You've had just personal discussions with that. That connection grows stronger. Think about everything we do within an Agile team. It's connections, it's a tight-knit team that works together and has open, honest communication. It's kind of hard to do that sometimes when you've never actually met the person. So spend that money, spend time with them, understand the way they live, the way they work, the office, everything they have, the challenges. Maybe you go there and you realize, oh gosh, we need to spend a little money and get them some better whiteboards, because those are terrible. Just little things like that make a huge difference. Okay, so while we're on this,
are we still in the platter? Or are
we finished the platter. We're on to dessert now.
Okay.
Yeah. So can you speak to the benefits of either a physical board or a tool like Jira?
Oh.
So this was one of our first arguments. Bob and I were standing up Agile at Teradata.
What did you believe?
I believed that tools were the answer.
And he was wrong. He was absolutely.
And Bob's like, no, we don't need Jira at all. Just put stickies on a wall. Everything will be fine.
Webcam, stickies, webcam.
Yeah, we don't need that. I may have changed my mind over the last decade.
I think it's a combination. I think for brand, it comes back to, I think I mentioned COHAA earlier. I think for teams that are trying to learn the behavior. So I'll tell a story this way. I was working at a company that was using a Rally, the CA tool, which is sort of a little bit more feature rich than Jira. And what I noticed is folks were having stand-ups, so about 15 Scrum teams using the Rally tool. They would have 15-minute stand-ups. And then the behavior was everyone would go back to their desk, pop up their to-do list, and follow their to-do list for the day. And then they'd have a stand-up the next day. And I remember someone pulled me aside. I was pretty new. I was a new coach at the company, relatively new. And this guy wanted a trigger. I was the administrator for Rally. And he's like, Bob, I need a trigger to tell me to talk to Sally. When I get a story of this type on my to-do list. He's really serious. He's like, I just need this trigger because I'll forget. And I was looking at the name tag, and there was like Sally right next to him, was sitting there. And I'm like, you mean you want me to put a database trigger in to tell you to pivot your chair around and talk to Sally? He's like, yeah, I need that. And my head exploded, and I went and I unplugged the server. I was like, that's it. We are not going to, and they thought, I probably thought I was nuts. But I'm like, we're not going to do tools anymore. It wasn't Rally's fault. Rally was not a bad tool, but what it was driving is non-collaborative behavior. Everyone understand what I'm saying? It was sort of, and the teams weren't mature enough to understand that collaboration trumped having the tool tell you to talk to people. You needed to get up. We needed to talk. We needed to collaborate beyond the stand-ups. They were just going through the tactics. So I did that, and then like 3 months later, we activated the tool. But the short story is they never ever turned off the Post-it notes. They kept, as they learned the value of both. The tools were valuable for historical archiving, but the Post-it note, the low fidelity planning stuff was great for collaboration. So historically, to this day, they're still sort of doing both. But I needed them to become agile, and there's nothing, for a shoe team, I always, if I can coerce a client, I start them with low fidelity tools. And then they can move up from that as they learn the behavior. That's why I was arguing with you at Teradata about that. And you were a tools guy.
Maybe you were right. Maybe.
Do you actually admit that?
I said maybe.
All right.
Said maybe. So I'm going to continue on that story. The most insidious thing that I've ever seen inside of Jira is what I call Jira tennis. So it's two people arguing in the comments of a Jira item. And you just sit and you watch it go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And they sit 20 feet apart, but they're arguing via Jira comments. When if they just went over and they talked to somebody, said, hey, what is going on? Like, I don't understand how you're getting this bug to happen. I can't recreate it. Help me figure it out. Let's sit down. Let's knock it out. And in like 2 minutes, problem solved. But no, Jira tennis starts. Right, that's the thing that when I walk in, the first thing I do is I look at the backlog, then I click on some of those items, I look at the comments. When I started my last job, we had stories with 75 comments on them. And it was clear that that was a problem that we had. So guess what? We got stickies. And we used that. And the thing that I found about a physical board is you can't avoid it. You put it in a spot where no matter where you go, you see it. You can unintentionally, but intentionally not go to that Jira board and see things. Maybe I don't click on that bookmark I've got to see the status of things, or maybe I don't check my email and see all the comments and the progress on that Jira item. But when I go to get a glass of water, or I go to the restroom, or I go to lunch, or I walk in the morning, that board's staring at me. I can't get away from it. It's a constant reminder of why we're here and what we're trying to do and what we're trying to build and what our team is focused on. So that's the value that I get from it, is it's a constant reminder saying, why are we here? What's our goal? These next 10 days for our sprint, what are we trying to do? It's always there reminding you of what you're there to do.
It's not just for the team either. We're emphasizing team, but there's this notion, this basic agile notion, something called an information radiator. A burn down chart is an information radiator. A sprint planning board is an information radiator. It's really hard to radiate information from tools. They can, but people don't. I'm telling you, I'm a senior leader and people would send me status reports with all these links. Do you really think I'm going to waste my time and look at with all due respect, shut up. I'm not paying attention to that. But what I need to transition to as a leader in an Agile is it's hard if I'm going to the bathroom to avoid like charts and things on the wall. I can see it. And you want it to draw, the information radiator is to draw people in, to have succinct information. So I'm not anti-status report or anti-dashboard. I'm pro-information radiator. So it's not just for the team, it's for the entire organization. We should all be paying attention to it. Even the boards on teams outside of your team. So team. You all, if we're working together in a company, you should be asking questions about each other's boards. You should be curious and inquisitive. Why? I thought it was a burn down chart. It seems to be going through the roof. Is that the intended operational plan for your team? No? Okay, well, what are you doing about it? That's the accountability. The conversations really are generated from that. I know the tools can generate some of that, but there's nothing as powerful as organizational information radiators. Now again, getting people off their butts, out of their chairs, and out into the hallways and rooms looking at it. We have to be proactive, but really pay attention.
So the last thing I want to say is wheels, put your boards on wheels. That's one of the most powerful things I've ever done. Is every team at a couple jobs ago had their board on wheels. And when we would do scrum of scrums or something like that, or do an update, everybody would come rolling in with their board and stand it up and talk to it. We had developers build this massive 6 sprint wide board for 6 teams. It was
out
a
of
6
2 by
6
6s
grid.
and industrial strength wheels. It was huge.
Yeah, it was massive. And that was our plan for the next 6 sprints. We would roll it in. It was giant. It took a while because it was giant. And we got it there, and teams would talk about their plans for the next sprints. But everybody could see it. Everybody knew where it was. Everybody knew the patterns of how to read that and understand that. Everybody had their own personal sprint board, and those went with us wherever we went. And yes, we had Jira. We had Jira too to manage the work along the way, but the radiators were physical boards, and those traveled with us wherever we went. We would take them across the hall. Actually, the 6 by 6 one was too tall. We couldn't get it out of our space. The team tried to roll it out and they realized the mistake, so they wanted to refactor that. Okay, so moving on.
Next.
To the next combo platter.
We have a combo again?
Another combo platter. So these are 2 questions similar about executives and senior leaders and Scrum, and how in the world do we get them to get on board? How do we get those pesky VPs and C-level people to actually adopt the values of Scrum? How do we get them to understand the roles and actually help support the adoption?
So encourage them. There's a movement now by a couple coaches that talk about leaders go first. So it used to be, and it still is, predominant view that teams go first. But there's some thinking nowadays that before those pesky teams go Agile, the leaders have to actually go Agile first, which means they get a little training, they get a little Kanban board, they get some cards. They may be operating at a leadership level, at a strategic level, but it's dog fooding. They eat their own dog food before they make the teams eat the dog food. And by doing that, they learn. They learn behaviors. They fail a sprint. I love it when leaders do that and they fail a sprint. It gives them humility. It gives them understanding. It's painful. And teams often fail their first or second sprint, but that's how we get learning. So that's one way. Coupled with that is training. Is another thing. But flipping gears, let's say you're in an environment where that didn't happen. I would say show them. I think we dovetailed into information radio. Draw them into the excellence of agility. So there's this notion of how do we sell our leaders? I don't think you ever sell them. It's a no-win situation if you're trying to market Agile to them. You need to focus on team excellence, radiate that excellence, and draw them in like moths to the flame, if that makes sense, instead of trying to sell them the flame. And focus on what you can control, which is the team, and really team behavior and team results. Now, part of that is the product owners. You need to make sure you're building compelling things, the right things, and it's aligning with the business demands and things like that. But I've seen leaders, even outside of technology, I've seen a CFO, I've seen a sales VP come running into my office, and it's like, I want some of that. I'm like, what are you talking about? I want some of that Agile. We're going to operate our sales department in Agile because you're kicking butt over there. So I want to, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, I don't know. It may be different for you because you're not building software. You're trying to make money for all of us, right? You're trying to drive revenue. But the point of them coming in is they see the results. It's speaking. I didn't sell it. They see, and it's not just the results, but like congruent discussion. We would expose our retrospectives. At one company, we had release retros. And we would just, I remember the sales VP at the time, he was like, Bob, there's such honest discourse. You guys will tell you something that you made a mistake, and in the very next retrospective for the next release, you fix things, and then you might have something else broken. I'm like, yeah, that's life. We are continuously improving. He's like, what the hell's up with that? And you're exposing, and you'll entertain anything. I can give you an idea, and you don't yell at me or push back or just talk about being too busy. You embrace it, and you do something. Well, yeah, that's what we're supposed to do. He's like, well, we don't do that internally. What's up? I want some of that. So it's not just software results, but it's behavioral changes. So that would be one recommendation is now, the key there is to get the behavior right, to not fake the agility. Everyone with me? But to really get to, there's this notion of sort of doing Agile and then being Agile. What I think speaks for itself is that being Agile, where we're really driving the results from a mindset.
So there's two tricks. The most powerful question I've ever asked leaders is, what do you think Agile is? Agile is one of those terms that's overloaded, like
I like that.
dashboards, right? You ask, hey, build a dashboard, right?
Yep.
And 50 people will give you 50 different answers. One of the questions I ask when I'm hiring developers is, what does Agile mean to you? I've talked to probably close to 1,000 developers. I'm pretty sure I've never gotten the same answer twice. Ask the leadership what they think Agile is. Get a baseline for what their expectations are. The most likely thing you're going to have to do is educate them. And they're smart people. They're in that role for a reason. They're in that role because they're smart. They've been able to adapt and learn and grow. Take that opportunity to educate them on what Agile is and isn't. There's so many times where we just assume what they think Agile is. And we start connecting these invisible dots, and they're like scratching their head of what's going on, right? So ask that very simple question. What does Agile mean to you? What do you think it is? And then that will help you chart your path of how you get there. The second thing that I've had a lot of luck with is not using Agile terms. Not speaking about it like that. One of the most powerful things I ever heard, the very first conference I went to, the very first Agile talk I ever heard was in Atlanta, and I don't remember the guy's name, but it was fantastic. He told a story about how he was hired by the military to come in and get this project back on plan and get to execute and ship it and deliver to help the people in the field stay safe. He got called into the 5-star general's office that was responsible for this, and the 5-star general was like, I don't like this Agile crap, so don't tell me you're going to do Agile, just deliver the project the old school way. And this guy did a fantastic job. He's like, okay, cool, I get it. Here's how we're going to work. We're going to build the list of things that you want done. I'm going to sit down with you. We're going to put them in order. Then we're going to work from top to bottom, and every 2 weeks, I'm going to show you our progress. And I'm going to take your feedback from that, from what you saw, what you liked, what you didn't like. We'll readjust the priorities of things we're going to do. Then 2 weeks later, I'll come back and do the same thing. He talked the general through that. The general got up, slapped him on the back. He's like, this is going to be great. You are going to get us right on track. I'm so excited. Because he didn't use those terms that somebody misunderstood about Agile, that 5-star general was completely on board with Agile. He just had a disconnected understanding of what Agile was. So that's something that's been very powerful for me, is taking those terms out, because people sometimes misunderstand what those terms mean, and they have a notion that maybe isn't correct. And you just get around that by just explaining the process without the ceremony names. Okay.
Is that the end of the platter?
That platter, yes.
Okay, cool.
So we're on to risks and innovation.
Okay.
So how do you encourage team members to take risks and promote an environment where members feel it's okay to fail?
I mean, I think you have to, one idea is to model it. I often tell this story that at one company I was coaching the Scrum Master. So I was the VP of engineering, or the senior technical leader. So I was a pointy-headed manager, leader of, a couple hundred people. I was also the Agile coach. So I was the Agile transformation coach, just because I have that experience. And as part of that, I was coaching the Scrum Masters. So once a week I would coach the Scrum Masters. We were a pretty mature Agile shop, and so we had consistent results on our sprints. And I started getting concerned about complacency. So I remember talking to the Scrum Masters once in one of our coaching sessions, and I was like, I think I want us to fail more. I said, we've had like 180 sprints that were successful. Like we met our goals, and we applauded, and we had wonderful sprint demos, and life was good. I mean, we were kicking butt, and it was well recognized in the company. So we were selling ourselves, basically. And I'm like, but we always were in like 10 stories, 10 stories. Does that make sense to everyone? We would bite off what we could chew it, and I just felt like, well, I was looking for failures. I was looking for biting off 10 and delivering none. And I wasn't looking for little failures. I was looking for like plane crashing into, flames failures. And I described this to the Scrum Masters, and I remember Maureen Green was our most senior Scrum Master, and I still, respect her and love her to this day, and that's what she does. And she's like, Bob, let me get this right. We've had nothing but success for the last 6 to 9 months, yeah? We've just kicked the butt of the entire organization, yeah. And that's not good enough. You want us to fail. Yeah. And then it's like, do you have a metric? Do you have a failure metric you want to hit? No. I mean, I didn't have a number. It was more of an attitude or something. And I tried to explain it to them. And then I remember, but I wanted them to encourage their teams to take risks. Everyone with me? So I just look for risk opportunities if you can. So we can't make them happen, but we can encourage risk taking. We can encourage learning. We can encourage that. And I activated them. And then I remember one team, so I got what I asked for. A few sprints later, a team bid off high technology stuff, took some technology risks. They literally went into a sprint, they bid off 20 stories to use that as a metric, and they delivered one. So they went down in flames, and they were at the demo. And they got up on, you know, all their little sad faces were up in the demo on stage. We had stage, and it's like, we failed miserably. And I remember to this day that our VP of customer support, she started picking at their professionalism right there in front of a large stage and questioning their integrity and questioning their work ethic. And I jumped up and I'm like, stop, right? I said, I had to defend them. I wasn't defensive, I had to defend the learning. So I had to sort of give them cover, if that makes sense. I talked yesterday about leaders providing cover of role modeling, like not overreacting to failure. Like looking at failure, and honestly, I wasn't making it up. This was good. I was proud of this darn team. I was freaking proud of this team. And I said it in the meeting, and I'm like, what I'm really excited about is what they're gonna do. This is a high performance team. This team rocks. And they took a risk, and they failed, and they're learning. And I said, I'm looking forward to the next sprint. I'm looking forward to what they come out of the retro with. That's what I'm excited about, and I had high faith and high belief in them. So I think I'm role modeling. I think we have to create space. I think we have to encourage. Another thing I did is I would throw myself under the bus. Sometimes we have to model that failure is okay in the organization. So sometimes in a team, like I would talk about my own failures. I would be transparent, and I'm like, you know, I failed to do this. I wasn't amplifying that. I'm not that proud of it, but what I was saying is life goes on. We all fail. So sometimes as leaders, whether it's a Scrum Master leader or a PO or a leader in the team or a leader of the organization, you also have to embrace and give space and sort of be self-aware and be vulnerable and show that you fail too. And that gives permission. I hope I'm making sense. It gives permission for it. But it's not, you know, do it. But it's like the earth doesn't come, we move on. That's what continuous improvement is about. So there's some ideas there. Are you going to disagree? You're giving me the devil eye.
No.
Are you going to disagree with me?
No, I should, but I won't. So I agree with Bob. And the hardest thing in a leadership role is to model risk-taking. Because oftentimes, if you take a risk and you fail, that failure affects your whole team. So when I had a team of 60 people, if I missed, it affected those 60 people. The best risk I ever took was bonuses were coming up. Some people liked bonuses, some people didn't. It was a bit of an archaic approach. Our enterprise architect pulled me to the side and said, hey, I got this idea. We trust our team, right? We believe in our team. We're big on fist of five. After every sprint plan, after every PSI plan, we take a fist of five and say, how confident are we? Let's do a fist of five as a group and let that define our bonus. Let's put 60 people in a room and say, go 1, 2, 3, 4, throw up a number, and that will be the percentage of the bonus that you get. I said, well, that sounds pretty cool, you know, but that's like money. That's paycheck, right? People are counting on that. Will people be comfortable saying, hey, we didn't do good enough, and say, hey, Joe, Bob, Sally, I think we should not get as much money because we didn't do a good enough job. Was anybody going to be honest and transparent enough to do that? I said, let's do it. So we did it. I pulled the team together. I said, okay, we're going to talk about bonuses. Here's how it's going to work. I explained, okay, we do fist of five. I trust you. You trust each other. We're going to fist of five our bonus. We're going to talk about the past quarter and decide how good we think we did. And that's going to drive how much money you take home in extra money a couple weeks from now. It got real quiet. Real quiet. Everybody did it. Somebody threw out a 2. When that person threw out a 2, I applauded them, I thanked them, I highlighted them for having the courage to be honest and truthful with their team, then we revoted. That person went to a 3, some people that were 5s, they came down to a 4. We narrowed in on the right answer. That was a huge risk. I didn't tell my boss I was doing that. I didn't tell the VP of HR I was doing that. I turned in the bonuses for everybody. Here's the numbers. They didn't know how I did it. But the team responded to that. They appreciated having a say in who they are and knowing, okay, if I do better, if I show to our other teams that we do better, they're going to respond and we're going to earn more money from ourselves. That's one of the biggest risks that I took, and it set it off for the rest of the team, like, okay, if he's willing to do that, maybe I'm willing to try this other thing that I thought we should do, but I was afraid to say. So model that behavior. The risk is greater whenever you're in a leadership role, but the reward is equally as great. So here's a question. Where can I get one of those snappy Metacast t-shirts? So Bob handed me this card because I got this t-shirt from my wife a couple Christmases ago, and every time we talk together, he gives me a hard time about
they only got one t-shirt. They didn't get me one.
So
this is the only snappy one. So we're going to take action on this card.
We are? Okay.
And we're going to get a lot of these snappy t-shirts.
Okay,
And maybe
all right.
we'll hand them out as gifts and stuff.
Okay.
And I'll be the first one to get, right, one of those snappy
Maybe.
t-shirts.
Maybe.
2XL.
Okay. I got you
2XL.
covered. Okay.
Can I attack this one?
Yeah, go ahead.
What is a balanced way to measure effectiveness of TDD, e.g. how to determine test-driven development, TDD, ROI without a lot of cost effort to make the determination? I'm actually going to say don't measure TDD. Don't measure so what I could replace it with another XP practice like pairing. Everyone with me? So measure the effectiveness of pairing, pair programming. Measure the effectiveness of user stories or acceptance criteria. Another XP practice. Measure the effectiveness of refactoring. Another XP practice. I actually don't think we should be measuring those. I think the team should be interested in that, but I think we should have some meta measures that are above that of things like throughput. Everyone with me? Like, what are we producing the value? So measure value produced at a team level. Are we producing improved quality? So TDD to me is sort of part design play, part quality play, part automation play. So is TDD resulting in more delighted customers from a design perspective? So measure customer delight. Is our defects, like our escapes, at one company we measure defect escapes. So defects escaping into customers. Well, TDD practices either help that or they hurt that. So measure the outputs, the outcomes at a team level, at a business level, rather than the practices. I hope everyone, like measure coverage, like test coverage tools, like JCover and things like that. I would say, at a systemic level, don't measure them. The team should use them, but use them for a business outcome. And then measure the business outcomes is what I'm focusing on. So keep it, almost draw a line. What is the team interested in from a technical practices perspective? And then doing that. And if TDD isn't resulting in improved business outcomes, then reevaluate why are you doing it? Maybe we're not doing it properly or something. Like for example, if TDD is slowing you down, it shouldn't be slowing you down from a throughput perspective. Maybe in the beginning, but after 5 years of TDD, if it's still slowing us down, there's another problem going on. So really put on that holistic throughput mindset. Anything?
Yeah, so I disagree.
The reason I teed this up, I thought you might
I do.
Do you disagree?
Well, you softened your message. You came in heavy, like it doesn't matter.
Did I come in heavy and then
then you
but hit me on the heavy. Hit me.
So to me, the thing that got me more comfortable with your response was when you said the team should measure it. The team should understand, is this adding value or not? The thing that I put in front of the teams that I coach is we have all these numbers, but you have to treat it like a cockpit for an airplane. right? There's a million dials and numbers and gauges there. No one gauge tells you whether you're doing good or not. You know, am I getting from North Carolina to Columbus, right? That's the end goal. That's the business driver.
Is this Columbus?
This is Columbus. But the indicators along the way, and that the coverage and the number of breakages, those are indicators of how you're doing. They aren't the answer of how you're doing. So you have to work really hard to get teams over the fact that it's just an indicator. It's not a measure of success. There have been so many times where I've put all these numbers in front of teams and they panic, like, holy cow, he's measuring us by all of this. Like, no, I'm not measuring you. I'm giving you information about how you guys are performing. I want you guys to make the decision on what changes should I make. TDD, should we keep doing it? Is it adding value? How do you know if you don't have the metrics of bugs are higher, we're delivering slow, or all these things? There is no one number, but you've got to look at about 6 or 7 different things and say, okay, what's that waste? Right? That's really what it's about. Is it wasteful or not? Well, you have to give them ways to understand if that's waste or if it isn't. And without those metrics, you're just doing stuff just to do stuff because you read it in a book or a blog or on Twitter or something like that, right? You've got to understand, should I keep doing this?
I think the other thing I'm triggering on is the ROI. I think there are some technical practices where they're just good professionalism and they're not ROI justified. So if you went to a physician and they were going to sort of, they would only wash their hands if it was ROI justified, right, between operations. Right, so they had a choice about washing their hands. They had a choice about washing the instruments. And the bean counters would come in on ROI, and some teams would, and some doctors would, and sometimes some doctors wouldn't. I would be like, I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go to the Cleveland Institute where everyone washes their hands. And so there's some things, I think, in software teams that are not discussable. There's some things for me as a leader that are non-negotiable. I just expect good practices. Like code reviews. Everyone with me? So what's the ROI? Sir, what is the ROI proposition of code reviews? I don't want to. I think it's good. It's intangible. I think it's a good thing. Design reviews. I actually look at TDD as being that kind of a practice. If the team selects to do it well. It may be one of those underlying technical practices. That's just the cost of doing business. Everyone understand what I'm saying? So there's almost, not everything is ROI justifiable. We don't want to expose everything to the hospital administrator. They're going to look at, their lens is going to be skewed by sort of finances. But there's good, in software development, in technology, there's good, I hope there's professionalism. I hope there's solid technical practices, and I hope the teams, like in the doctors, I hope the doctors would push back and say, no, I'm going to wash my hands no matter what. And I hope the teams have technical practices that they adhere to, and that they're sound and they reevaluate them.
Okay, we have a pair of questions that are similar. How do you explain to companies that scaling bad technical practices / habits is not an Agile problem? Paired with, how do I encourage an Agile team to make refactoring a higher priority? So I consider not refactoring a bad technical practice.
Right.
And then oftentimes, as this person says, is that Agile gets the blame for a technical problem.
Yeah.
Right? You just didn't hire the right people. You decided, hey, we're gonna jump on the .NET Core bandwagon because I want to run .NET on Linux. And it's not officially out yet. It's in alpha. I think it is now. I'm pretty sure it is. But back when we talked about it, it was in alpha. And the team wanted to do it because they wanted to get off of Windows and into Linux. And we said no, right? Why would we put our business's livelihood on an alpha product that has a year to go, right? But it was the cool thing. We wanted to do it. It was going to be neat. We were going to be able to say we did this. We could put it on our resume and look cool, have a little badge of honor. But it wasn't the right technical choice. Right, so you've got to, again, I always connect things back to business value. So when a team or an architect or somebody says, hey, we need to upgrade this component from version 3 to version 4, that's not good enough for me. I require them to define the business value of we should upgrade this from 3 to 4 because it's going to close these security loopholes and prevent us from ending up on Reddit because somebody found some backdoor into our system that exposed the names of all these students. So they have a technical recommendation,
right, but they align it with business, right, sort of rationale. Right.
Right, is really understanding why we should do this. and getting them to think like a product owner and understand we should do this because of this and understanding that. So to me, it's getting the team to understand the long-term outcomes of if I don't refactor, what's my life going to be like tomorrow? That's the question I ask most often is, are you going to be happy with yourself in 6 months if you don't do this? Is your life going to be better or is your life going to be worse because your technical debt just keeps growing and you don't refactor? So think about yourself in 6 months or a year from now, and are you going to be happy or are you going to be frustrated that you didn't do something?
I think organizationally, though, so there's asking the team to present the business case for TDD to some degree, right? Or refactoring or any other technical practices, but at the same time, trust your team. So not push back. So as long as a leader, when I've been in companies, I actually encourage folks to put refactor stories on backlogs because they were not comfortable doing that. And I want to see them there. And then I want to see the business why behind it on a story-by-story basis. But at some fundamental level, I could challenge the team as a leader so much that they'll stop putting them there. I could talk about the business pressure we're under. Oh my God, we have dates. Are you really suggesting refactoring? For God's sakes, we've got a date to meet tomorrow. So I can influence, I can pull that back just by the way I as a leader react to that, how I emote to that stuff, right? Versus I can support it and trust them. So we were talking about trust way earlier. I just trust the refactoring. As long as it's sort of micro refactoring, as long as I think it's thoughtful, am I really in a better place to know if we need to do it or not, or can I trust the team? It's like trust the team. And we will continue to refactor. And imagine how a team feels if I'm trusting them. Now the business dynamics and the technical dynamics, and we get blending and we get ownership across the team. So I think with technical practices, we have to be careful. We have to extend trust. They're closest to it. If you're a project manager, if you're a tester, and it's the testers, automation targets, if you're doing test automation, trust them. Give them feedback, make sure that they're aligning it with the business, aligning with costs, making sure we're not starving features, but at the same time, encourage their strategy. And if they're wrong, it will emerge. We can adjust. What's the worst we can do? If you're 2-week sprints, the worst thing that can happen is we screw things up for 2 weeks. And then we have a retro, and then we make an adjustment and we pivot. So it's not the same as waterfall projects.
Okay, we're going to end on a heavy one.
All right.
Yep. With Agile transformation, our
That's
product...
long. My God, that's like
an
epic.
Right, it is an epic. With Agile transformation, our product partners still expect fixed scope and fixed delivery date, with many attempts to explain that Scrum provides incremental releases with highest value, so on and so on. We all know that, right? And Kanban provides fixed scope and flexible date. How would you suggest to influence, educate, and adjust expectations?
Anyone here familiar with the triple constraints? Could someone articulate it? I just want to end on an interactive note. You know that triangle, the orange triangle, triple constraints. So what's one dimension? So schedule, time is one dimension. Resource cost, I'll say, did you actually say resources? So I'm just kidding around. That was just a joke, just a joke. You're right. It's so schedule, time, cost. What's another dimension is typically scope. Everyone with me? Very often in the middle, someone puts a magical letter called Q, right? So in waterfall projects, so something has to flex. So in my sordid past, I mean, I've been scarred. I've been around the block. I've worked in waterfall as much as I've worked in almost a little less than I've worked in Agile. So I understand waterfall dynamics, et cetera. So in that, what do we flex on? You have to flex on something. So I remember at EMC, years ago I worked at EMC. I was the director of a QA team. They're a very large QA organization. And I could see as we approached the date, stuff would start happening. Like we would agree that we would do code reviews and then we would stop doing code reviews. We would agree we'd do design reviews, we stopped doing it. We stopped doing inline documentation. We stopped fixing important bugs. Like our triage rules would get flexed and we would leave, like the priorities of the bugs that we would let in the code would sort of be rising to the point as we approached the date. So what were we flexing on? Q. We were flexing on Q. We were trying to fix on everything. In Agile, it's a different triple constraint. It really is a different game. If we want to play it properly, if we want to play, what's the flex point in Agile? Anyone? It's not Q. It's not time, and it's not cost. So what's left? It's scope. It's a scope trade-off, not a macro scope trade-off. Not, oh, you wanted 10 features and you can only get 7. We could actually get 8A and 9A and 9B and 10A. We can trade, it's a micro, macro, early detection, right? We're finding out sprint over sprint over sprint that we have to flex on scope. It's a flex scope game. If folks are not willing to do that, stay where you're doing, right? Like, go do, adapt quality. At EMC, guess what? What would happen is, guess when we would clean up quality in the next release? We would have 30 to 40% of our time in the next release that would be fixing the previous release. Guess what we plan on our capacity for the next release? 100%. So we would always be overcommitted in the next release and the next release by 140%. We always wondered why we were like in this black hole of despair, always producing crappy stuff, cleaning it up, and never, we were doing it to ourselves. So Agile is a do it right the first time, hold quality dear play. I'd have that discussion with your leaders. It's like a game of Monopoly versus a game of, the rules are different. If we're going to freaking play them, and we don't have to be perfect about it, but I think we have to engage that the rules are different, and the trade-offs are intentional. What do you think?
So I involve them in the process, and then I end up putting the shoe.
Oh, you're going to do the part. I was an ogre, and you're going to partner. I was the hard ass.
Well, no, because it gets to an ogre, right? I put the shoe on the other foot.
All right, all right.
And I say, okay, so this is our scope. This is our scope for the next 18 months. You can't change it. If you're saying we have to fix this, and we have to do this, and it's got to be fixed scope, fixed time, fixed everything, then the scope is fixed. You can't change it. You can't discover an acquisition 6 months from now and say, oh, we want to do this. Like, no. You said we have to do this by this date. That's the only way we're going to do it. And get them to understand that there's flexibility in the business, that we, as an engineering team, have to be flexible to that business. And we can't be flexible if you don't understand how the decisions in the strategy office, how that affects the things that we need to do. So force them to be fixed scope. Have that discussion with them. Say, okay, cool, you want this? Here's what it means. That's what we're going to do, and the steering wheel is locked, right? It's on autopilot, and that's the way we're going to roll. They're not going to have a good feeling. They're not going to be happy and say, that's exactly what you're doing to us. That's exactly the position you're putting us in. So it is a bit of an ogre, but you've got to get them to put that shoe on their foot and understand what it's like. So that's the approach that I would take.
So it's lunchtime?
It is lunchtime.
So with that, the Metacast is officially done. We're going to stick a fork in it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.